Then, on 21st of August 1911, the painting was nicked.
The heist was both daft and daring. What actually happened was that a young Italian workman, a painter and decorator called Vincenzo Perugia, just walked out of the building with the Mona Lisa under his coat, presumably whistling a cheery aria as Italian workmen are wont to do. He took it back to Mamma Italia. Pandemonium broke out. The museum was closed for a week, the director was sacked, and 2 new guard dogs were appointed, Jacques and Milord. The whole of Paris had a right good laugh at the expense of a red-faced Louvre. New lyrics were set to favourite melodies which satirised the cheeky abduction, and these were sung in music halls and cabaret clubs across the city. One dirty ditty found the Mona Lisa in a place of ill repute.
Mon poteau, embrasse-moi, je suis pas bagueule, mais je m'ennuyais beaucoup dans ces palais. Un soir que le gardien criait en ferme, j'ai répondu ta gueule, je suis carbatée toute seule.
Which roughly translates as, hey mate, give us a kiss, I'm not fussy, but I was so bored in that palace. So one night when the guard cried closing time, I just said, fuck you mate, and scarpered.
The year the painting returned to the Louvre, after being found in Italy, was the first of a world war when a generation bled to death for France. Then in 1940, a second war erupted, bringing humiliation and occupation. And after that, there was the loss of empire. So after all of this, how to project the prestige of France in diminished times? Why, with art of course. And the Louvre had a role to play in a piece of cultural diplomacy. In 1962, General de Gaulle decreed that the Mona Lisa should visit the USA. So La Joconde left Le Havre on the luxury transatlantic liner SS France in a first-class cabin cocooned in a waterproof container that would float if the boat sank. On her arrival in New York, she was received by President Kennedy like a head of state, before doing her duty for France and becoming a massive hit with the American public.
Monsieur Marot, I know that the last time the Mona Lisa was exhibited outside Paris, in Florence, a crowd of 30,000 people packed the gallery on a single day, while large crowds outside smashed the windows. I can assure you that if our own reception is more orderly, though perhaps as noisy, it contains no less enthusiasm or gratitude.
By the 1960s, and despite the treasures within, the Louvre was showing its age. It was stuck in the past. So perhaps that's why new wave film director Jean-Luc Godard decided to shoot a sequence for his 1964 film Bon Départ there, to show his heroine Odile and would-be criminals Arthur and France attempting to beat the world record for running through the museum. Obviously, they're up for a bit of fun in the stuffy museum. But I also think this is an artful piece of satire by Godard, a quick critique of the French cultural establishment. So how could the museum get a new lease of life? Well, return to the idea of building again. Return to the spirit of the Grand Dessin.
In the 1980s, it was the creation of this structure behind me here which symbolised the transformation of the Louvre into a museum for the modern world. This is the glass pyramid designed by the American architect I.M. Pei. Finished in 1989, it's the most visible expression of the grand projet of the then President of France, François Mitterrand. And it's now the pyramid that defines the Louvre to the world.
the Louvre was perfect for Mitterrand.
The inauguration of the new entrance to the Louvre by President Mitterrand this afternoon means the public will now be able to...
Mitterrand was a politician with an acute sense of history and a vanity to match. When elected in 1981, he was looking for projects that would be lasting testaments to his presidency. His culture minister Jacques Lang suggested radical change for the museum.
Passant et repassant devant le
I was going past the Louvre every day, and I remember being shocked by the dirtiness of the place and its general state of disrepair, with all the dust covering everything. And I was shocked by the presence of a large car park right in the middle of the Cour Napoleon for all the civil servants.
J'ai adressé à François Mitterrand.
So in, I think, July 1981, I added a little note to Mitterrand titled Le Grand Louvre. I said to him, what if we totally completed the transformation from palace to museum?
Totalité du palais au musée.
If all things Egyptian were the shock of the new in a previous century, plans for a pyramid structure reflecting the ambitions of Mitterrand as a modern-day pharaoh created a storm. Le Monde's critic accused the government of turning the courtyard of the Louvre into an annex of Disneyland. Oh la la, quelle horreur! But I actually think that the Louvre came out of all this smelling of roses. This time, the modernists have won. When I look at the pyramid, I feel like I'm looking at a great work of modern art in steel and glass. Still, I'm curious to know what the Louvre's great pioneering Egyptologist, Champollion, might have made of this tribute to an ancient culture. And what strikes me in a city of most meaningful monuments is that this says we are a modern country. We are go ahead. Nous sommes la France très cool. But it's not only the outside that impresses. The pyramid illuminates a huge reception area underground. And new areas of the Louvre have been opened up to the shining light of culture, including the new Richelieu galleries in the East Wing, formerly occupied by the men from the Ministry of Finance. The palace would now be all museum.
I'm in the Cour Marly, and I'm surrounded by statues. This courtyard area used to be open to the elements, but now it's all glassed over, letting the light of the Parisian skies flood in. And that makes it a really comfortable and airy place to view art.
Visit today and you understand that the Grand Louvre project has been a runaway success. Before the 80s, 2 million people visited the Louvre every year. Now, the figure's closer to 9 million. And this grandest of grand projets continues. In September 2012, a new gallery opened to house the riches of the museum's collection of Islamic art. Here are 3,000 works in 3,000 square feet of exhibition space. All housed in the most radical piece of architecture to grace the museum since the pyramid. There's a wonderful elusiveness to the Islamic gallery's roof and ceiling. Is it a golden veil, undulating sand dunes, or perhaps even a flying carpet? Under this covering there are great treasures. With Islamic strictures against representations of the human form, everyday objects become art. A candlestick adorned with ducks. A perfume burner in the shape of a cat. Both from 11th century Khorasan in Central Asia. And these calligraphic delights with their messages from the past. A lamp that shines the wisdom of Islam. A 9th century vase with a love letter written on its side. And a plate from Samarkand with an inscription which reads, "At first, magnanimity has a bitter taste, but in the end, it feels as sweet as honey." And in the lower galleries, I'm looking for a special work because it gives us one last reminder of this story of the Louvre. And here it is, the Baptistère de Saint-Louis, a masterpiece in brass, inlaid with gold and silver. It was made in Syria in the 14th century, the work of Muhammad ibn al-Zayn. It's beautiful in its detail. And here, a coat of arms seemingly hammered on at a later date. This is the fleur de lis of the Bourbon kings. How this extraordinary object got into their hands is not known, but it was used to baptize Louis XIII, son of Henri IV and father of the Sun King, those great builders of the Louvre. And it made its way to the museum in 1793, confiscated from the royal collection by David and the revolutionaries.
But for all this magnificent art, there's also a much bigger picture. This shows that the museum is sensitive and aware, building a bridge between France and the Muslim world. And this fulfills France's historical role as an influence there, une puissance musulmane. So, another canny piece of cultural diplomacy to project just the right image of France in today's world.
But let's end where we started, with the word, with the medieval word, Louvre, meaning stronghold. Because when I began this journey, the Louvre did feel very much like a cultural fortress. But time travelling through its art and history, what I've tried to do is open it all up, literally to l'ouvrir le Louvre. And in the process, I've come to realise that there's another word which sums the place up much, much better. And this is a very French one, very Gallic. La gloire.
Now this is a word which is a little bit difficult to translate into English, but what it's about is power, splendour and beauty. And that for me, chers téléspectateurs, is the real treasure of the Louvre, buried deep here in the heart of Paris.